Hi, welcome to Republican Roundtable. I'm your guest host, Jennifer Zielinski. Tonight we're moving away from candidates and our election season, and we have a very special guest and friend of the show, Nick Rahn. Welcome back to the show.
How's it going? Thanks for having me back.
Well, thank you for being here. It's always great to talk to you when you are here.
Thank you. Yeah, you guys actually got my start on TV, so I appreciate you guys.
We're always glad to have you back too, so it's always good to just kind of return where you started.
Absolutely.
And Nick is the founder and CEO of WarriorsNextAdventure, and we will ask you what that is for our TV viewers.
Yeah, so Warriors Next Adventure is a nonprofit that I started back in 2019. I started it back in April, and by I think it was November is when we came on. Shortly after, we actually started a 24/7 crisis line.
Okay.
Now, I was with the Minnesota State Patrol for 8 years. I was in the Air Force for 6 years as law enforcement. We call it security forces, so Master Arms or MP in the Army. And so I have extensive training in crisis intervention. And so what we ended up doing was with this crisis line, we've had 113 calls in the crisis line since December 2019. We've never lost anybody.
That's good.
We're pretty good at what we do.
That's good. And we will get into more on the suicide
Sure.
hotline right now, but let's talk about just to bring up the suicide hotline for our viewers.
Yeah, so it's actually my personal cell phone number. So it's pretty easy to get a hold of me. My family hates it because my phone's always ringing, but it's, you know, I gotta answer. So the best part is the veteran crisis line, the 988 number is now the national crisis line. If you press 1, that's directly for the veteran crisis line. So the problem is they're staffed, but they're overloaded. And so what we decided to do is, since we have the knowledge and we have the ability to help, we decided to open up one for ourselves too. And like I said, 113, that's a number I'm proud of.
Extra support and something that our veterans need. Tell us about Warriors Next Adventure that you started.
Yeah, so I struggled with my mental health getting out of the military, and it's well known that most veterans struggle with mental health when they get out of the military. Not all of them, a lot of them make it out just fine, but I struggled quite a bit. Eventually, it led to a suicide attempt. Lucky for me, the gun didn't go off, and I'm still here. It was around 2017, I was working as a 911 dispatcher, and I got a phone call, and it was a suicide. She was saying that she was going to end her own life, and I was the one on the other end of the line. And at this time, I had never told anybody about my suicide attempt. I kept that to myself and decided I'm ashamed of this. I'm never telling anybody. And when I felt like I was having some issues with her, she told me that she was a veteran. I'm like, perfect. I was like, that's my relatability that I need for you so I can save you.
You were able to connect with her at that point.
Exactly. And so she told me she was an Army vet. I'm not going to share her story, but eventually it got to the point where I felt like I was losing her. And it looked like she was taking a step forward. And so what I decided to do was like, before you go, can I tell you something I've never told anybody? I was like, 2 years ago, I attempted suicide, and I'm still here. And I've been trying for 2 years to figure out what is my purpose and why am I here? I think this might be it. And so within seconds, she starts consoling me. And I'm like, there's something to this. And not that I want to glorify suicide attempts or anything like that, but it helped her realize that human connection is important. So even though she was the one at risk, she started consoling me. And because she had that human connection, she got down from that bridge. And shortly after that, I decided I could do a lot more. So I started this nonprofit to essentially help veterans that are in that position that I was in back in 2015.
And you guys do it through recreation, through a lot of programs. Talk about how you focus it and how you work with veterans to really help with some of the issues.
Sure. Yeah, the three main things that we focus on are sense of purpose, camaraderie, and adventure.
Okay.
Those are the main things in the military that we really, really need, right? And this is the three main things that we lose when we get out too, because most veterans get out and they don't have a plan. I want to speak to every veteran or every military personnel out there. Please have a plan before you get out of the military. If you don't, every single county has what's called a VSO. And so we work directly alongside the VSOs, and through talking to them, we kind of figured out what are all the problems that we're dealing with. And the majority of them are lack of adventure because of seclusion. They're staying at home instead of going and doing things with their friends. They don't have a group of friends that they can reach out to. And then on top of that, they have no purpose, right? Not all of them. There's a lot of veterans out there doing amazing things. And our goal is to help find those veterans that are struggling and help them find that purpose.
It sounds like you have some great programs too.
Yeah.
We've talked about the Wolf program where veterans go meet the wolves.
Yeah,
Minnesota?
so that program is actually called Operation Wolf Dog. We have a partner that we have a program we partner with called Minnesota Wolf Dogs. They're a wolf dog sanctuary. It's not just pure wolves. They're all pure.
Okay.
They're all crossbred with either Husky, German Shepherd, Malamute, and they actually have 22 animals on the property. So what we do is we found out that they were kind of struggling to make they were struggling to expand, and they needed help, right? So I'm a carpenter, and I went out there and I said, hey, why don't I bring veterans out here and we'll build dog houses for these animals. And so what we started doing was we'd build dog houses for each wolf, and every time a new wolf would come in, we'd go build them a dog house, we'd build them a kennel, and we'd actually introduce them into their kennel. I personally got to go rescue a wolf. His name is Timber. He's my best friend. I love him. So every time I go see him, he will run up to the fence and he will backflip off the fence. He's so excited to see me. I'm one of the few people that can actually go inside of his cage because I'm daddy.
And you get to play with a wolf.
We'd play with wolves, yeah.
And you guys do other amazing things, adventures, it sounds like all over the United States.
Yes.
Mountain climbing.
Yeah, the mountain climbing division is a lot of fun. It's very painful. Mountain climbing is a pain in the butt. It takes about 9 hours to climb mountains. What we do is we take 5 veterans, we do a fundraising lottery. So the first 5 veterans to raise $500 or more get an all expenses paid trip to go to Colorado with us.
Okay.
If they're local, they have to suffer a 14-hour drive with me in my truck, which is good because I can't escape and they're going to talk to me the whole time. So we drive to Colorado. We train jiu-jitsu at multiple different locations because jiu-jitsu is another one of our programs. We'll go to that in a second. So what we do is we meet up with a couple Colorado veterans and we train jiu-jitsu with those guys, and then we go out into the mountains and we climb a 14,000-foot mountain. I believe there's 50 something in Colorado.
Okay.
Don't quote me on it, and I'm probably wrong. So far we've climbed 2 there. We've climbed 1 in New York, and we've climbed Eagle Mountain in Minnesota. It's only 2,000 feet, but we've climbed it probably 5 or 6 times. So the whole point is to get guys focusing on what's in front of them instead of what's behind them. And so while we climb these mountains, we talk about their traumas, we talk about some of the things that happen in the military, and what we're doing is it's a process similar to EMDR. Now, I'm not a therapist, I don't have any fancy letters next to my name, but what we do is we found that climbing these mountains while talking about traumas are pairing those 2 experiences together, right? There's a saying called neurons that fire together wire together. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to get them to talk about a trauma while doing a new adventure. Those 2 things are paired up together. Now, every time that veteran starts to have a flashback or certain things about that trauma start to pop up, next thing you know, they're on top of a 14,000-foot mountain with my ugly face staring at them. So.
And it sounds like even though, I mean, you've learned a lot doing this, but you
Yes.
still partner with therapists, with those in mental health to really bring that to our veterans.
We have multiple therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, EMDR therapists. We've had some of them actually come out with us, and they all love what we do. We're very lucky that I've done a lot of research in the last 7 years now, and I've learned a lot about epigenetics. I've learned a lot about neuroscience, neurolinguistic programming, and a lot of that has to do with how to hack your brain and how to essentially control everything that's going on around you. Because my big saying with Warriors Next Adventure is you can't always control what happens to you, but you can always control your reaction. So essentially what we're trying to do is get veterans to understand no matter what has happened in the past, it does not define who you are, and we can change who you want to be. So with everything that we do, our main focus is to help veterans find their purpose. Like I said before, purpose, camaraderie, and adventure. Those are the 3 main things we're trying to focus on.
Yeah, and that's just something that is needed. You know, we have veterans who get out of the military. Do you want to talk about the statistics that you do see that have, you have seen over the past couple of years? Has that improved at all, or has that?
So there's the number 22 is always thrown around there, right? And on average, 22 veterans a day commit suicide. Now, people don't like when you say commit suicide, right? But that's what they're doing, right? So I don't like to sugarcoat things. It's unfortunate and it's sad for the families that have had to experience that. But what we're trying to do is stop it, right? And if you don't talk about something, nothing gets fixed. So the number is actually higher than 22. I believe it's somewhere in the 30s these days. Of course, COVID didn't really help with a lot of seclusion that ended up happening. So our main focus is, like I said, we're not a therapy nonprofit, but we are a mental health nonprofit. Our focus is talking about all of these things and using these fun adventures to open veterans up and put them in a spot of vulnerability where they're allowed to actually talk about their situation. And then we push therapy on everybody. I go to therapy once a month. If you guys aren't going to therapy, I highly suggest going to check something out. It's extremely helpful, but the problem in society is a lot of people think that a therapist is going to fix you. A therapist is not there to fix you. The only thing a therapist is doing is giving you the tools you need to get your life in order. And so what we talk about is you need to get your life in order. You need to be the one to fix everything, right? it's okay to go get help. It's okay if you need medications, take medications if your doctor says so. I'm not telling people to, but if your doctor says so, you do what your doctor says. Go to therapy, find a group of veterans, find your tribe. There's a wonderful book called Tribe. I highly suggest any veteran or anybody out there who's struggling with some sort of connection issue to read the book Tribe. It's amazing. I'm personally writing a book right now called The Warrior's Path to Inner Peace, and it utilizes my 6 principles that I came up with this nonprofit. And the 6 principles are actually what I teach when I speak for the Air Force.
What are your 6 principles that you do teach?
So the 6 principles, it's hard to go into that without going long, so
okay.
I'll just go over them briefly. The main thing we focus on is environment, right? The environment that you surround yourself in and how that's going to affect the way that you are. You're essentially going to become the 6 people that you're closest to. So choose the people you're closest to wisely, right? We call them the shooting stars and the black clouds. That principle is called look at who you associate with. We need to look at the people that we surround ourselves with and realize who are the people that we need to push away and who are the people we need to hold close. The second principle is you have to look at what you have. It's not just focused on physical items. A lot of people out there, I grew up fairly poor, so just having food every night was a thing that I was very happy to have, which is why I eat so much these days, because I love food. So you have to look at that, but you also have to look at your skills, your abilities, but also your characteristics, right? Your character traits. Those are things that you can hold on to. Everyone has a specific character trait that they bring to the table. Everyone does. I don't care who you are, you have something to provide. And so you need to take those strengths and you need to run with them. After that, we focus on acceptance, which acceptance is the one that takes the longest, because how do you accept losing a friend overseas? It's very hard to do, right? And when I say accept it, I don't mean get over it. What I mean is understand that trauma will never go away. That memory is never leaving you. You need to learn how to control and change the meaning of why that happened or what that does to you when that experience pops up. After that, we focus on look forward to a positive future. That's the 4th principle. Now, that all focuses on manifestation. We tell veterans all the time that you can quite literally manifest whatever you want. And so, go back to my suicide attempt. In 2015, I decided the person who existed, or the person who could have stopped me from trying to take my own life didn't exist. So I was going to create that person and become that person. So part of that speech, I always tell people, literally make yourself into your hero, right? I don't consider myself right now my hero, but me 5 years from now, that guy's my hero, and I can't wait to be him. And so it's mainly manifesting your own destiny and then figuring out how to take those steps, right? And the 5th principle is how to take the steps, right? It's make a list. Focus on the easy goals that you have, like making your bed, eating healthy. Those are things that I don't really struggle with, but I have to force myself to continue to do because I'll never make my bed if I didn't have a girlfriend. She's very focused on make your bed every day, so she's a good partner. But then you have to think about the difficult goals, right? So I need to gain another 10 pounds before I go row across the ocean. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Oh, definitely. I'm excited to hear about that one.
I need to focus on writing down my goals, which is something that's actually hard for me. It's one of my principles, but it's still very hard. And then you have to do the things, your goals, right? The things you really want to do, the things that you really need to do. So me personally, I want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And we have something set up for potentially 2024. But I also have what's called an impossible goal. The impossible goal is something that people tell you, you can't do that, you're not good enough, you're not this. And so I always tell people, do it anyway and take pictures, right? So my impossible goal was to become a motivational speaker for the Air Force. Pre-2018-ish, I was not a great speaker. I was an MMA fighter, so I was getting hit in the head a lot, and I was a little slow. So after I took some time off of that and really focused on speech and developing my grammar and everything like that, I started to get a little bit better. And what I said 2 years ago, I'm going to be a motivational speaker for the Air Force. Everyone told me it was impossible. And this last Sunday was actually my first speech for the Air Force. And I'm already contracted for Minot Air Force Base, Malmstrom Air Force Base, and we're working on Andrews and a few other places. So the main thing we do is we bring these principles to them and we show them like this is a way to live your life. This is also a way to get out of whatever it is you're in. The 6th principle is very simple, but it's the hardest thing, which is why it's the 6th principle, is you have to love yourself. You know, teach people self-care, positive self-talk. Don't say negative things about yourself, right? Now, if it's in comedy, it depends on what the meaning is, right?
You have the comedians who
exactly.
roast themselves.
Self-deprecation it's funny, you know?
Yes.
So it depends on the intent, right?
Yeah.
Always speak with intent. So if I say something, there's usually an intent behind it. Do I say things that offend people? Sometimes. But I'm not going to apologize for what I said because the intent was not to offend. If they get offended, I apologize. I'm sorry. So positive self-talk is extremely important. But you also have to talk yourself up. You need to be your best cheerleader because nobody else is going to do it for you.
And you brought it up, you have to be your hero, the one that's gonna, help you start to get out there and then seek that help.
Well, the hard thing is, I had somebody at this last speech, actually, I always ask people, who's your hero? And I always hear like your mom, my dad. I had one lady say Jesus. I'm like, well, I guess I'm done talking now. Like, can't really beat that. But I had somebody say to me, and it made me think, why do people think this way? He said, it's selfish to think of myself as my own hero. I was like, why? We're literally taught that being your own cheerleader is a negative thing. And I totally disagree with that. Now, me 5 years from now, I can't wait to be that guy, because that guy's doing some amazing things.
And that's how you're growing with your principles and teaching others too. Nick, you have an event coming up at the end of November that we touched on, rowing. It's not a short distance, is it?
Yeah, so November 28th, me and 3 other Air Force Security Forces veterans, I was Security Forces as well, we're flying to Spain, and then we're going down to the Canary Islands, and we're participating in a race called the Talisker Whisky Atlantic Challenge. So it's a 3,000-mile ocean row from the Canary Islands to Antigua in the Caribbean. So we're rowing a 28-foot rowboat. The record was set in 50 days and 11 hours in our boat.
Okay.
So we're trying to do it in 49. So
I can't even think of rowing for like an hour, and that's going to be a 50-day or...
Well, I'm telling you this much. I don't like rowing. It's not super fun. It's boring, right? And we're going to do it for 49 days. It's somewhere a little over 1 million strokes per person. So the way we do it is 2 people row at the same time, and then 2 people sleep in the cabs of the boat. So the cab in the front, cab in the back.
Okay.
So we'll row for 2 hours, sleep for 2 hours, row for 2 hours, sleep for 2 hours. So that'll be interesting. But it's all in the name of veterans' mental health. Right? So the organization we're rowing for is not Warriors Next Adventure, but it's one of our many partners. Fight or Die is an organization. What they do is they send veteran teams overseas to go row across the ocean in what's called the whoopee. The Army folks will know what that is. In the military, you get a blanket, and it's called the whoopee, right? You keep that thing close, it keeps you warm, it's waterproof, and everybody loves their whoopee. So the sense is that the whoopee is going to protect us. On top of that, what they do is they do scholarships for anybody who is going to school for mental health to help veterans. If your focus is to help veterans, you can apply for the scholarship, and they'll give you up to a $2,000 grant to help you pay for school.
That's amazing, because we need more mental health workers.
Absolutely.
We need more therapists out there.
Especially with a veteran focus.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying that veterans are special, but if you think about it, there's more civilians out there walking around with PTSD than veterans, because the leading cause of PTSD is actually car accidents. So there's many, many more civilians walking around with PTSD. The only reason why the veterans are so talked about is because we're a small, small percentage of the population, but the vast majority of veterans are struggling with PTSD. So, therefore, the percentage it's ridiculous how many guys are actually struggling. So.
And there's a unique set of circumstances that we've hit on, but it's just you're going from one environment, you're going overseas where you're with your squad, with your comrades, and then you're coming back to a different world where it just takes away that, just coming back to the real world. It can be just a hard change.
Well, on top of that, what you're doing is you're living every single day with the same 10 guys, 15 guys, 30 guys, doesn't really matter how many. So that's your squad, those are your boys, those are the people that you love, right? And then you get back and they get ripped away from you and you never see them again, right? Unless you're with an organization like me, you can travel with me around the country and we'll go meet a bunch of your buddies. So some of the amazing things that we've done in the last couple of years is we've put, I think it was 11 veterans behind the wheel of a race car. We didn't talk about the race team yet. We have a couple of dirt track race cars. We've put, I believe it was 11. I don't know the exact number. We put 11 veterans behind the wheel for the first time they got to race in a professional dirt track race, which is pretty sweet. I personally have a car that we likely will be purchasing in the next couple months, and we'll be using that one as well as the main race team. The beautiful part is it's pretty cheap to race. It's not expensive to fix the cars, so that's where a lot of the money goes. But once the car is running, we can actually make money racing, which is amazing. So every person who races the WNA race car, they have to donate their money to the nonprofit. That's our only rule, right? You get to race our car, but you get to donate to the nonprofit to help other people get behind the wheel. But we do that. We also filmed a documentary last year called PTSD versus Jiu-Jitsu, focused on the positive effects of Jiu-Jitsu to overcome PTSD. And what we ended up doing is we drove a short bus around the country for 45 days. It broke down about 25 times.
Oof.
Lucky for me, I'm a mechanic, so I fixed it every time. Until we blew the engine again the second time down in Orlando, Florida. So there the bus sits still, so we're getting it fixed eventually. I'm still working on the documentary. It's a lot of work. But the stories that we got from the veterans that train jiu-jitsu and have overcome heroin use, severe depression, suicide attempts, alcoholism, all kinds of terrible things that people have had to deal with, that have utilized the sport of jiu-jitsu and the camaraderie that you get from it and have completely turned their lives around. And so it's a beautiful story of all these veterans. So I'm hoping to get it out next year. I'm also hoping to get my book out next year, so we got a lot going on in the next couple months.
You are a busy guy.
I am.
You also have a podcast, if you want to bring that up here.
Yeah, so I was doing something called Veterans Action Report for quite some time. That unfortunately is likely coming to an end. So you can still find that on YouTube. You can go to a Veterans Action Report. I think we have somewhere around like 40 episodes or something along those lines.
Okay.
But we also have Warriors Next Adventure podcast. What I do is I have veterans on my show, and I like to do face-to-face because it's a lot easier to
personable.
do.
Yeah.
I don't like doing it online. But what we do is we talk about mental health, we talk about the goofy stuff. It's a very inappropriate podcast, so if you don't like bad language, I probably recommend not watching it.
Yep.
But the focus is good. The focus is to get veterans sharing their stories, talking about the good times, but also talking about the struggle and how they overcame that struggle. Because one of the best ways to overcome something is listen to somebody else who's actually experienced something that you've been through and how did they get out of it. And that's what the Warrior's Path to Inner Peace book is about. It's essentially a workbook if you're struggling in any sense. And it's not just for veterans, it's for anybody who's struggled with trauma. It's focused on those 6 principles, but also utilizing a lot of my life story and how I got out of all of these dark pits and got to the point where I consider myself successful.
And you're also showing everyone that they are not alone in this. This is something that has been experienced by others. You're trying to prevent that 22 number. You're trying to make that go down to 0.
It's so I said earlier the impossible goal. Right? My big impossible goal is to end veteran suicide completely down the line and eventually suicide altogether. Is that an impossible goal? Probably, but I'm going to try. You know, like I said, 113 calls to the suicide hotline. I'm pretty happy with that number. We've also started partnering with multiple law enforcement agencies because of my experience in law enforcement and tracking people. Multiple law enforcement agencies have started working with us, and we help find veterans that are actually missing that are potentially suicidal.
Okay.
On top of that, like I said, we're doing motivational speaking for the Air Force. Our goal is to help rewrite the protocols for locating suicidal airmen, which is essentially learning how to properly use like AT&T, Verizon, how to do actual tracking on their phone, finding these people, but also getting them the help they need without, completely screwing their career up. Because a big problem in the military, and this is something that people don't like me talking about, but I don't care because it's a problem. And in the active duty military, depending on what job you have, if you go to mental health to go get help, they'll take your gun from you.
Yep.
They'll make you clean the squadron. So your whole job, you essentially get punished for getting help.
Yeah.
That is not okay. So the main thing that I try to tell people is, listen, we need to focus on doing the right thing and getting these people some help. Somebody should not get ostracized for going to get help. That's not fair. So all essentially you're doing when you're ostracizing somebody for going to get help, you're showing people, don't go get help, it's bad, right? So that's what we're trying to do in the Air Force, is come around and say, hey, listen guys, this is how it should be done. This is how you could potentially help more people. We're not trying to tell people what to do, but we're out there giving them options. But with our speech, at the end of the speech, what we're doing is we're kicking all leadership out of the room. And so it'll just be, in the military, you have E5, which is just the base level of leadership, which is staff sergeant, sergeant in the Army, I don't know, Marines and Navy. They're different. But what we're trying to do is get all the lower ranking people in there to talk about some of the struggles that they're having. And I want them all to provide solutions, right? And so with my nonprofit, we could potentially raise the money to help them, or we can talk to their leadership and see how can leadership actually accommodate these airmen to help lower the depression levels and lower the PTSD levels and hopefully end suicide in the Air Force.
And Nick, as we end our show here, how can our viewers get a hold of you?
It's very simple. Everything's Warriors Next Adventure. I also started another organization. We're doing motivational speaking. we partner together. It's called Invoke Change.
Okay.
You can find that on Facebook. You can also find us at icseminars.org, WarriorsNextAdventure.com. We have Facebook, Instagram. I run everything. Feel free to reach out there. The crisis line is 612-518-9282. You can call that 24/7. If you call and I don't answer and it's nighttime, call twice because I'm kind of a heavy sleeper, but I will pick up. On top of that, you can also email us at WarriorsNextAdventure@gmail.com.
And what is the suicide hotline? I want to say it's 998.
988
988
is the crisis line, right?
Crisis
so
line, okay.
that's the national crisis line. Anybody can call that if they're struggling.
Okay.
If you're a veteran, all you gotta do is press 1. That'll bring you to the veteran crisis line.
That's great. I mean, thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
And hopefully we can reach that out to our viewers or anyone who are having those issues. Reach out to you, Warriors Next Adventure, and we can start to bring that number down to 0.
Yeah, and on top of that too, I just want to say one more thing. Any veteran out there who has not gotten their VA claim, please locate a veteran service officer and get your VA claim filed. Whether you think something's wrong or not, just get involved with the VA. The VA healthcare system we have here in Minnesota, the VA, the doctors, the nurses, they're all amazing. The claims department can be a little ridiculous, but that's what a VSO is there for. Their job is to essentially hold your hand through the process. My VSO down in Dakota County has done amazing things for me. The PACT Act has just come out, and I think they approved 26 different cancers that are attached to the burn pits, which I actually had cancer last October. Luckily, I fought it and I beat it. But mine is working on getting the approval done. And so anybody who has experienced cancer and experienced the burn pits should absolutely go file a PACT Act claim. So if you don't know what the PACT Act is, please contact your VSO, reach out for help. You can feel free to call me, email me if you need help with anything as a veteran. There's multiple organizations that will help you with funding. Simplify Funds is something I want everybody to know about, because Simplify Funds will help you if you need to pay rent, if you're going to lose your house, something like that. Another organization I want to shout out is hicksstrong.org. It's HICKSSTRONG.org. If you're a veteran, military-connected spouse, if you need therapy now, you go to that website, hicksstrong.org, and you click Request Therapy. You'll get a phone call within 30 minutes, and what they'll do is they'll set you up with a therapist in your area. It'll be telehealth, unfortunately, but how can I serve everybody? Telehealth
Becoming the norm.
Yeah, telehealth is amazing.
Yeah.
And so if you need help, go get help. My main focus is to get everybody in some sort of therapy, doing something to grow themselves and actually better themselves.
And Nick, thank you once again for coming on our show.
Of course. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining us on Republican Roundtable. Again, I'm Jennifer Zielinski, and we talked to Nick Rahn from Warriors Next Adventure. Thank you.